Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. So there is a video that Blair White did. Watch the title. It's called The Dark Reality of Detransition, Regret and Activist Bullying. And it is a video where Blair talks about somebody, this is a few months ago, it is back in October. It is a video where she interviews someone who detransitioned. This person, hopped on Twitter, shared their experience, and got a lot of negative backlash. And we're just gonna go right into it.
Before we get into the reactions from the trans community, which are absolutely going to give me an aneurysm, let's watch the video and see exactly what Casey did wrong.
Hey y'all, so I got out of my haircut, because my hair was driving me nuts, and I shaved it because I'm tired of watching my hair thin out, and it's less distressing if I shave it. So when I talk about being too far gone, I don't really know what else to call it. This is what I mean. This is how deep my voice is. It's gotten deeper over time, and it's settled. This is what I mean by hair loss. And it just keeps getting worse. It keeps thinning. It keeps receding backwards. And I'm not exactly sure that's coming back. Those are the main things when I talk about being androgenized to a point of no return. I really don't see those being fixable. So that's when I talk about, just kind of staying how I am, regardless of how I feel. That's why, just because I don't really see me personally being able to come back from what's happened so far. So I hope that's a little explanatory, just to kind of give a little bit more of a, let me reword that, just to kind of, talk about, give more awareness to the situation.
So
Blair is an adult detransitioner. Blair is an adult transitioner. I transition as a minor. Naturally, we're going to have things that we don't agree on. And I also just want to mention a tweet here that I found by Casey, and it says, well, I'm not happy about going bald, but that started before I transitioned, so I think it might have been inevitable. Gotta love PCOS. So if you combine this tweet with the video that we just saw, those are two different things. So was it the T or was it the PCOS?
first thing, just a correction to Casey. You weren't given hormones as a woman, you're given hormones as a girl. You were 15. How many times do I have to say on this channel that minors can't consent? That's just the most spoken sentence on this channel, I can only assume. If anyone is shocked that a 15-year-old is capable of making a permanent lifelong decision that they may regret upon growing older and smarter and wiser, you've either never been 15 yourself or you have never met a 15-year-old. And Casey didn't say anything in the video about how trans rights need to be stripped away, right? Casey didn't say anything about how transition as an entire concept is wrong or immoral. My transition didn't work out, so therefore other people shouldn't be allowed to transition. But of course, the hysterical, disgusting reactions would imply that Casey said all of those things. So let's get into it.
You don't have to say them to imply them. So originally I had all these tweets linked, but Casey ended up, I don't know, with a deleted account or deactivated account, I'm not really sure, but I do have a couple of them. And when this video was posted, this was the tweet that was shared, and it says, just to share some perspective, this is what almost 5 years of hormones does to a teenage girl. Remember, I'm 21. So that was the original tweet with that video that you just saw, and people took this as not a positive tweet, because if you read it, it's implied. From my perspective, this is what almost 5 years of hormones does to a teenage girl. There's a difference between going online and telling your experience and going online and fear-mongering people.
Spooky Maddie Cakes, really dumb name by the way, says, tell me you don't understand how hormones work without telling me you don't understand how hormones work. Casey Miller is a joke. Actually, this tweet is a joke because the expectation for Casey to have a full-fledged understanding of hormones, the effects that hormones would have on his body at age 15, and how that would be long-lasting and permanent, is the joke. Casey was a literal child when put through the pediatric transition pipeline.
When you talk to specialists, they tell you what's going to happen. If you get a new medication, these are the side effects. Also, common sense. I feel like this is just a really stupid excuse. Like, you're 15, you're acting like 15-year-olds are fucking stupid. 15-year-olds are not dumb. We're very aware of ourselves when we're 15 years old, even when we're children. You can literally Google the effects of testosterone or estrogen. Also, if you're putting something in your body, why aren't you researching it?
And guess what? We just saw Ty Turner, who apparently is very happy with his transition. I'm an example of someone who's happy with my transition. Ty said he started as a minor. That's great. But if you can't understand, acknowledge, or comprehend the fact that a good chunk of these people who start this as a minor are going to have regrets, you've either never met a 15-year-old or you've never been 15, one of the two. This is why you don't transition kids. because it's playing with fire.
Actually, that's incorrect. So if you take a look at the research right here, this was taken from a smaller pool, but it says the research found that 2.5% of transgender kids go through detransition, while a majority of young people keep their gender identity after 5 years. 5 years later, 94% of kids are still living as transgender. The Trans Youth Project looked at the so-called social transition between the ages of 3 and 12, with participants transitioning on average at 6.5. Data was reported by parents and youth either through in-person or online visits via email or phone correspondence. The study looked at gender identities of youth who transitioned 5 years on. Only 2.5% of kids actually went through detransition. A small group are now living as cisgender at 2.5% of the participant sample. And on top of that, I have a little bit more information. If we take a look at this website right here, for this one it says, for instance, in the UK, a survey of 3,400 attendees of Gender Identity Clinic found that just 16, about 0.47% experienced transition-related regret. Of these, even fewer went on to actually detransition and become detransitioners. In the US, a survey of nearly 28,000 people found that 8% of respondents reported some kind of detransition. Of this 8%, 62% only did so temporarily due to societal, financial, or family pressures. In Sweden, a 50-year longitudinal study on a cohort of 767 transgender people found that around 2% of participants expressed regret following gender-affirming surgery, although it is unclear how many of these participants were detransitioning as a consequence. And then we have, in the Netherlands, a study of transgender young people found that only 1.9% of young people on puberty blockers did not want to continue with medical transition. So for me personally, I wouldn't call that a good chunk. There are definitely many reasons why people detransition. Motives to detransition could be financial barriers to transitioning, social rejection in transition, discomfort with sexual characteristics developed during transition, dysphoria being too overwhelming, not passing well, thinking it'll be easier to live and just deal with the dysphoria instead of actually transitioning. There are a million reasons why somebody could detransition, and to blame it just because someone was a minor and they started is not very accurate. You know, if a minor is taking puberty blockers and they later realize that this is not for them, they can just stop the puberty blockers. And that takes quite a bit of time.
This is why you don't transition kids, because it's playing with fire. Dominic says, really frustrating to see people like Casey Miller gain 14K followers in a month for spreading lies and misinformation regarding medical transition, when I know at least 10 trans men who have been cultivating their platform based on positivity and resources with little to no traction. Yeah, because there are just no trans people who gain followings off of painting transition as a fairy tale and as a positive thing with no downsides. Oh yeah, that's every trans influencer.
I watch a lot of trans influencers and a lot of people talk about their experience and they talk about the positives and negatives, but also in general, people just share positive experiences on social media. People like to paint their life as perfect when they're on social media, so that's just something that comes naturally, not even just in the trans community.
ContraPoint says the person in this video doesn't even identify as a detrans woman.
A few minutes later.
He's posting, look what hormones do to teen girls, because it's clickbait for bigots. Is it clickbait when it really happened? Pretty sure clickbait is like, this is what hormones do to teenage girls, and it's a result that is false, and the person never actually went on hormones. This is a literal 15-year-old who went on hormones, and this is the results. What about that as clickbait? And yeah, anyone concerned that 15-year-olds are going on hormones that permanently alter their body and are concerned about the ramifications of that, they're just bigots. Totally. What is this, 2016? Everyone who disagrees with me is a bigot? Okay. She goes on to say, no one cares when boys go bald, but girls invoke the myth of precious white female flesh defiled, irreversible damage. It is irreversible. And there was damage that took place. And people who experience that have every fucking right to talk about it, just how you have every right to talk about how great your transition was, right? But the difference is no one can criticize that. They can only criticize the clearly mentally anguished person in their car talking to an audience of what he assumed at the time before going viral was probably like 6 people, right?
Absolutely, they have every right to talk about it. But when you get online and you start talking shit or implying everybody else is going to feel the same way, that's when there's a problem. You can talk about whatever the fuck you want on the internet. You can post anything. People are gonna have something to say about it. Boo-hoo, then don't post on the internet. If you want to get online and start talking, people are going to reply.
I love how everyone has sympathy for gender dysphoria unless it's occurring in someone who transitioned and then regrets it, right? There's this narrative that gender dysphoria is so bad that people kill themselves over it, right? But this person's clearly experiencing what is objectively gender dysphoria. He's unhappy with the secondary sex characteristics and everyone's shitting on him for it. And it really is crazy how fragile your identity must be if you see someone else struggling in theirs and think that that's somehow an attack on you, right? And it's not as if, because granted, if all these people and all these little trans influencers were attacking Casey because Casey was saying things like, my transition didn't work out, so no one should be able to. My transition went this way, so all transitions are bad. Guess what? I'd have an issue with that too. Casey didn't say any of that.
You don't have to physically say something to imply it. I could sit here and say blank blank is the best person in the world in the most angry tone. Don't take it so literal.
Casey clearly is just upset in a car talking about how he's too far gone. By the way, language like too far gone is a bit dark for me, right? That's kind of what people say at the end of their rope. But this is the way the cults operate. You parrot exactly what they want you to parrot. You say and do exactly what they want you to say. And you are valuable and you are special and you are loved up until the point where you disagree with them or diverge even slightly, go off script even slightly. And it's also very telling how they have to twist his words to attack him. They have to pretend as if he's attacking transition in general.
This alone sounds like shit. I don't know how many times that I have to say it. I also wanted to show these tweets. This is after Blair's video, so she obviously didn't see them before filming this. But these are just some tweets that Casey had put out there. You can pause them to read them if you want.
So I came across your extremely viral video on Twitter where like you have just, how many million views is it at? Like,
I think it's at least 5 million at this point.
right. So you've been making waves and the video was very emotional. The video was definitely you getting very personal about the details of your transition. And you have been getting dogpiled in a way that I have not actually seen in a while. So why don't you tell people what your message was in the video and how it's being misconstrued and just give us the rundown.
Okay, so I started Twitter kind of from the perspective of questioning my own transition, or at the very least trying to support detransitioners. And I was kind of just contemplating on Twitter like the day before, like, okay, I'm not super uncomfortable with where I'm at right now, but obviously there's been physical changes from the testosterone that I can't reverse. I don't feel like I could present in society as a woman at this point. And of course, people are just like, no, you can do whatever you want. You can just come off tea and everything will be fine. The hair's not that bad. Your voice isn't that bad. So I made the video to prove a point, because I'm like, look, you know, my hairline's super receded. My voice is deep. Like there's only so much I could come back from this and let that be socially acceptable. So it was kind of just an explanation, and it wasn't really meant to kind of stand on its own. But then, of course, I forget what side of Twitter got to it first, but then it kind of went on the more conservative side and the detrans side and like the gender critical side. And then it hit the trans Twitter and it was taken in its own, like just kind of in isolation. And that's where everything kind of happened.
So, but what I think the important part here is that when you transitioned, you began as a minor.
Yes.
And that's the key point that, first of all, you know, I've been very upfront and honest. I don't know how much you know about my channel, but when it comes to transitioning, I don't believe minors can consent to transition. I think that it's way too big of a thing for them to properly understand.
Just because you didn't transition as a minor doesn't mean that others can't comprehend that when they're minors. Me and her are different. Obviously, she transitioned when she was older. I think it was like 20, and I transitioned when I was 16, and I started hormones at 17. If I was to sit here and be like, yeah, minors shouldn't transition, I would be hypocritical. And I took hormones as minor, but I also had to go through a big process before I did that stuff. From what I understand about today is sometimes it's not always that way. I had to go through a big process, and this was back in 1963, 15, right? And I came out younger than 15. I started seeing a therapist at that age. And so we want to talk about 15-year-olds being stupid as fuck. I was a stupid as fuck 15-year-old apparently. And now I'm so happy 12 years later.
Would you say that you were not able to consent to transition when you began?
Looking back now, absolutely not. Not just from the minor perspective, but also I was dealing with a lot of mental health issues. I began kind of questioning myself in May of 2017, and in December of 2016, I went inpatient psych care. I admitted myself because I was going to do something really stupid if I didn't. And I knew that that kind of wasn't an option. So I went inpatient over Christmas and kind of came back out and was trying to figure things out. So this was all kind of in the wake of a very traumatic event and kind of a crisis point. And I was always struggling, and it was really contested when I did seek care at a gender clinic of whether or not this was the right decision, at least on my end. But we were kind of going to the experts because I'm like, I don't know, I have this idea, but you got to look at it and see if you can make the right clinical call here.
So you went into inpatient care, and then you talked to a medical person and said, I don't know, like, this is kind of how I'm feeling, but I don't know. And I'm leaving it in your hands. First of all, if somebody came to me and said that, I'd be like, okay, well, we're not going to move forward with anything. Then we can talk about the issues in the medical field. Because if somebody's saying that, that's an issue.
Right. When it comes to transitioning, you rely heavily on experts, not you specifically, but everyone, because it's an area that a lot of people aren't very informed about. But the problem with that is that...
Okay, I get it. Yes, experts should know what they're talking about. But if I'm going to see somebody, it's because I feel a type of way. I've already thought about this for a while. I've already researched it. I've already done all this stuff. I feel this way, so I'm going to go see a therapist or a psychiatrist because this is really bothering me.
The experts are often even more uninformed than the patients, even when the patient is young. My biggest thing with all of it is it just seems like everyone's just kind of fumbling around in the dark and saying, yeah, do this and do that, and it'll fix this and it'll fix that. But a very common thread among detransitioners and someone such as yourself, which is more of a transition regretter, is you guys seem to have these other issues that are not being taken into account, not being addressed, and completely overlooked. So that is in and of itself a huge problem.
That is a reason that some people transition, but I wanted to take a look at this study here, and it says this up on the screen for you guys. It's a lot of reading, but it says that reasons for detransitioning were varied and included experiencing discrimination, which was 23%, becoming more comfortable identifying as their natal sex, which was 60%, having concerns about potential medical complications from transitioning was 49%, and coming to the view that their gender dysphoria was caused by something such as trauma, abuse, or a mental health condition was 38%. Homophobia or difficulty accepting themselves as lesbian, gay, or bisexual was expressed by 23% as a reason for transition and subsequent detransition. The majority, 55%, felt that they did not receive an adequate evaluation from a doctor or a mental health professional before starting transition, and only 24 of respondents informed their clinicians that they had detransitioned. I feel like we should be talking about all the reasons, recognizing them, and educating people on it. Not just saying, yeah, because you're a fucking minor and you're stupid and you don't know what you're doing and the medical doctors just don't give a fuck. Yes, that can definitely be the case for some. Why are we pushing that into people's heads? Why don't we just show people what's happening, the statistics, what's happening, and then put it out there and be like, hey, let me educate you about this. You don't have to make people scared. You don't have to make people be like, oh, we got to save the children from the trans agenda.
And when it comes to a lot of these trans influencers, it's really fascinating to me how they run these channels, which, I'm not going to say they blatantly tell people to transition, right? But they often present a very false picture of what transitioning is. They lean more towards glamorizing it and towards only showing, the success stories and the positives of it and never the negatives. And then you have these young people who follow in their footsteps, not necessarily saying you, but then the second it comes to someone regretting, it's like, well, actually, fuck you, and we're going to bully you, and we don't care how it affects you. 2 seconds ago, we cared about you and you're special, and now we don't care.
I can't vouch for the whole trans community, but whenever I see somebody who has detransitioned, that has to be a very, very hard and vulnerable thing for somebody to do, right? You are a strong person. That takes a lot because transitioning in itself, like I said, already takes a lot.
Yeah. And actually, the thing that, getting all of the hate that I have and the harassment on Twitter and across social media platforms, I'm only on Twitter, but I've seen from other people that apparently they're talking about me on TikTok, they're talking about me on YouTube, Twitch, I'm everywhere apparently. Mm-hmm. Seeing random people with like a blank profile picture tell me to kill myself isn't the bad thing. What kind of hurt actually was seeing like these major trans influencers that I watched pre-transitioning in the beginning and going on in my medical transition, and I looked up to because I thought, well, it got better for them, it's going to get better for me. And seeing them just blatantly flip and just, completely misconstrue the video, like call me bald and all of this stuff and kind of dogpile. That was kind of like, wow, I thought you were a good person. I thought that you had like great intentions, and maybe you do, and you're just acting out of anger, but this isn't a good look.
When I came across that tweet, the original tweet, I looked at it and I was like, okay, you're trying to appeal to a group of people. This was worded in a specific way. And I feel for a lot of people, and I am open-minded, and I love to listen to people's stories, and I want to learn about other people's experiences. But when I came across this post, it didn't make me angry. It made me like, okay, like what is your goal here? What's your ultimate goal here with this? There are so many other ways that you could have worded it. And sometimes people can take you out of context, and maybe you really didn't mean it that way, but that's how a lot of people took it, and that's why they were mad.
The justification they seem to be saying for attacking you is that you are trying to strip away trans rights, that you are trying to take away the ability for others to transition because yours didn't go as you had maybe planned. Is that true?
No, not at all. And I've tried.
But for the millionth time, it was like interpreted. If you could see the Twitter account by Casey, you would see that. And I have scarce tweets here because I linked them all instead of screenshotting them because I am a little bit of a dummy. I'm not sure what order these were in. But it says, it is clear, based on the number of young adults coming forward, that A, we can't 100% discern between gender dysphoria and body dysmorphia. There is a blatant difference. But anyways, B, one can present with feelings of gender dysphoria for reasons other than being trans. For example, trauma. Okay, yes, I've seen that. C, of the kids that are put on puberty blockers, we can't predict who will be fine with transition and who will regret it. Yes, that's why they get put on puberty blockers. That's the purpose. D, even young adults over age of majority are falling victim to fast access to powerful drugs because of informed consent. I could go on. I don't think I'm necessarily educated enough to understand D, but I do think that there are doctors out there who just throw scripts. Easy. And that is probably also something that happens with trans people. I heard about it actually from my interview with somebody who detransitioned, which you guys will see next week. It says, I want everyone to access high quality medical care for their physical and mental health. Right now, though, it's clear that even in adults, the informed consent model is leading to young adults making the wrong decision, and worse, children having to face the consequences. The current system isn't working. Enough people are getting hurt and are allowed to make life-altering decisions very quickly that the current model of care, at the very least, needs to be modified, if not rebuilt entirely. So I feel like it's so nuanced, it's so situational, because I knew when I was a fucking child that I wanted X, Y, and Z. I just wanted to be a boy, right? But I still saw a therapist, had to have multiple appointments, and then eventually got the shit that I needed to get. But I would have loved to go in there, one appointment, and have gotten my shit. But we can understand why that would be problematic, of course, especially when you're younger. I get it. How exactly are we going to fix that? Are we going to make people wait till they're 20 to transition, or 18 to transition? Who's going to solve the problem? I can tell you who. Vote Sam Collins for president in 2024.
And I'm still trying, but I'm somewhat giving up, to make it clear that I'm not coming after trans rights. I don't think that trans healthcare is unnecessary or a lost cause. I think it is very necessary for some people, but at least talking in like the pediatric population with kids and teens and even vulnerable young adults, the current model that we have isn't working because enough people are slipping through the cracks. Even if we could hypothetically say that there are some kids that maybe they are experiencing true gender dysphoria and we can medically transition them and they're not going to regret it 10, 20 years down the line, and maybe there's no medical consequences to this, we can't tell the difference because, I'm not a unique case. I only spoke out because I'm seeing, all of these other detransitioners that went through the pediatric transition pipeline, kind of look back and go, wow, this was the wrong decision. And here are all of the other red flags that they ignored.
Right. And
you cannot guarantee with anything other than being trans if you are going to regret something 10 or 20 years down the line. It doesn't matter. We could cut trans out of the equation anyways. If you go and get fucking surgery on any part of your body, if you get facial surgery, if you get a BBL, if you get put on meds for 10 years and suddenly you're just like, oh, that wasn't for me, so I'm getting off of them. There's no way that you can tell that with people. Someone could live as trans for 20 years and they might be like, all right, well, fuck, I'm fucking over it. I can't do this shit anymore. I just can't deal with it anymore. And then they detransition. There's no way. I mean, maybe in like hundreds of years we might be able to determine that, but humans aren't right 100% of the time either. So I feel like that's an impossible thing to request.
One thing I found really just like disgusting is how a lot of these trans guy influencers are taking it as an opportunity to compare their transition to yours and to say, well, I have a full head of hair, so why are you complaining? Blah, blah, blah. You should have known. The whole you should have known thing. How should you have known? You were a kid.
Exactly. And
Again, can we stop pretending that 15-year-olds are fucking dumb? Dude, if you are thinking about the fact that you are transgender and you want to start opposite sex hormones, are you not going to go on Google and look it up? Are you not going to ask your doctor? It's not that hard. We learn hormones in school as well. To be honest with you, I just don't buy that. Is that ignorant? I don't know, dude.
I even talking, and this is kind of the disturbing thing. I give some of like the trans influencers a little bit of grace, like some of the younger ones. I'm probably a little bit more forgiving than I should be, because secretly they're wondering, is this something that I'm going to have to face? I have a full head of hair now, or maybe I'm experiencing the precursors of baldness or some of the side effects. Is this something I'm going to have to face later? But especially talking with like some of these full-fledged adults that don't understand the concept that children are not equipped to make adult level decisions, that there's just a fundamental difference between a child's brain, even a teen's brain, and a fully developed adult's brain. It's ridiculous. It's mind-boggling to me.
Well, obviously, there are different stages in life, and I was curious to see about how gender identity works in children, so I did end up finding some research about it, and it says, how does gender identity develop in children? Well, around age 2, children become conscious of physical differences between boys and girls. Before their 3rd birthday, most children can easily label themselves as either a boy or a girl. By age 4, most children have a stable sense of their gender identity. So children understand gender. Kids are sponges for learning about things. They understand things. I just don't like the fact that people pretend that kids are fucking stupid.
And what's interesting is like, have these people, first of all, never been a kid themselves and never met a kid in their life? Like, are they just living this existence where they've never been around kids to understand that they have less of an ability, if not a complete lack of ability to make long-term decisions? This is just a simple like reality of what it is to be a young person. So it'd be one thing, not that I would ever condone the level of attacking on you, but it'd be one thing if you really were on screen saying, I transitioned as an adult. The results weren't good, so I don't think anyone should be able to transition. This is basically what they want you to be saying, right? Because it gives them a reason to actually attack you. But the reality is you were a kid who had no idea what they were getting themselves into. And the fact that this is the community that is so loving and tolerant, and this is the community that stands by its own. No, it's a cult. It's 100% a cult. You and I were conversing in DMs when it first happened, because I was seeing all this hate, and I was like, there's no way this person is doing okay. I hope you are doing okay.
Yeah, being transgender is a cult. I started it, by the way. It's my cult. No, but I do think the community can definitely be aggressive as fuck. I've experienced it. But to be honest, I used to be an asshole on the internet. So
had some ups and downs. It wasn't because of Twitter. It was because of just my own mental health. I mean, Twitter didn't help, but it wasn't directly because of the hate. It was just kind of working through my own stuff. But yeah, I remember I was like, I don't understand why everybody's wigging out. And you literally just typed, you poked a cult.
Yeah, you did. I believe you completely poked a cult. And the thing about these people is their entire reality, their entire livelihood, their entire identity is based upon a very specific narrative, right? That's why it's so rigid. That's why you follow the rules to the T or you are banished. And you see it with even trans people like myself who don't follow the narrative, but still are trans and happy and whatever. And you see it with people like yourself who are like, wait, there are some problems here. They will never tolerate that.
You are banished. I closed the doors. Everyone screamed at me to close them. Okay, you were holding J.K. Rowling's hand trying to get inside. We had to close the door.
And I think that goes to show the mentality that this isn't about the facts. It's not about actually helping people. It's about having this in-group and this cult that they need to prop up their entire reality.
Yeah, I mean, The standpoint that I'm coming from, because I do have somewhat of a clinical background and I am going to school for social work. I was previously in nursing school and just, having experience in the behavioral health system, is that we're emphasizing throwing meds and surgery at a mental issue, or potentially giving kids the wrong medical treatment for something they could work through in psychotherapy. And the fact that, psychotherapy, even if you look at WPATH Standards of Care 8, they don't really emphasize it at all. They say it's not really necessary, even in the pediatric and adolescent model.
Are you talking about conversion therapy? I don't believe we should be throwing meds at kids either. Psychotherapy. I don't know what the fuck that means. Psychotherapy, sometimes called talk therapy, refers to a variety of treatments that aim to help a person identify and change troubling emotions, thoughts, and behaviors.
That, frankly, for me, and I think for a lot of people, transition didn't make a difference for me. The only reason I'm functional today is because of psychotherapy. And, I feel like we're doing a disservice to our youth. This is not about, detransitioning trans kids and trying to push people out of existence. It's our youth deserve better quality care, and they deserve not to be medicalized against their will. That's just the standpoint I come from, at least.
Do you see why people were angry? Medicalized against their will. The way that it's worded is it sounds like you're being strapped down and someone's taking a T-shot and shoving into your arm weakly. It's not against your will. You're going to the therapist, you're going to the doctor, and you're talking about your experience. And then they say, okay, here's the path to fucking solution, or whatever they say. So that's not against your will, dude. You went to the therapist. You don't word it a different way. Stop saying it like that.
Right. And one of the things that I've really learned from talking to so many detrans people is that there are a lot of them, and you can tell me if this is the case for you or not, a lot of them seem to have a bit of a traumatic relationship with their birth sex. Like they go into transitioning almost to run away from their birth sex because they have whatever issues with it. And the really interesting difference there, and that I've noticed with other people who are trans and seemingly happy and whatever, like Buck Angel, myself, others, is like, I never went into transition with the intent of like, oh, I hate my birth sex, I want to run away from that. It was more like, I think I would be happier this way. I'm feeling this very specific, medical situation happening. It was never like this traumatic, like running away from being biologically male, which is another reason why I don't understand why I'm supposed to hate it.
I feel like that was very blue-haired lib of Blair to say, to be honest. I mean, I hated everything about being a girl. Completely, utterly hated everything about it. Some trans people don't, and that's totally fine. But from my experience, I did. I really, really did. Anyway, she's saying that the people that she's interviewed, they've detransitioned based on traumatic relationships with their birth sex. So I wanted to do some digging, and I found a couple of studies where they do mention reasons why people detransition. So if we take a look at this right here, it says a new study published in LGBT Health found that 13.1% of currently identified transgender people have detransitioned at some point in their lives, but that 82.5% of those who have detransitioned attribute their decision to at least one external factor, such as pressure from family, non-affirming school environments, and increased vulnerability to violence, including sexual assault. Then we also have this. It says the study uses data from the 2015 U.S. Transgender Survey conducted by the National Center for Transgender Equality, which surveyed 27,000 transgender people in all 50 states. Of the 17,151 trans people surveyed who said they had undergone the process of gender affirming transition, 2,242 also said that they had detransitioned at some point in their lives. The most common reason cited for detransition was pressure from a parent at 35.5%, pressure from their community or societal stigma, 32.5%, or trouble finding a job, 26.8%. Other reasons included pressure from medical health professionals, 5.6%, or religious leaders, 5.3%. Detransition was significantly associated with male sex assigned at birth, non-binary gender identity, or bisexual sexual orientation, which is consistent with prior research finding that these factors are associated with lower rates of societal acceptance. Only 2.4% of transgender people who reported past detransition attributed this to doubt about their gender identity, while only 10.4% attributed to their past detransition to fluctuations in gender identity or desire. And here are just some more detransition stats. I'm going to post them up here. That's too much. It's a mouthful for me to read. Yeah, so I don't think the most prominent reason is because they have experienced some type of trauma with their birth sex, based on what I have found. That definitely can be a reason, respectfully, and I can understand that, and I've seen that explained, but it's not the majority of detransitioning.
What was your relationship with your birth sex when you started transitioning? Like, what was that about?
So I had a really complicated relationship, mainly because I was not like a typical femme girl. I had PCOS. I was like a pretty blocky build, like I was a rectangle. Um, and I did have more hair growth, and I kind of looked more masculine, but I was still clearly female. And from childhood experiences of being sexually abused and kind of emotional abuse and purity culture within the fundamentalist church, for me, it made the idea of growing up to be a woman very undesirable. And I was grappling with my sexuality, and I thought I was a lesbian at the time. And frankly, I felt like my mom wouldn't tolerate me or,
Mm.
associate with me if I got into a relationship with a woman as a woman. So I figured and this wasn't the overt reasoning, but looking back on it, I think this was a main reasoning was, well, instead of being a lesbian, why can't I be a straight man? I fit more of the
Wow.
stereotypes. I, dress masculinely. But the way I've dressed hasn't really changed much at all from when I was a teenager. I wear most of the same clothes. And I thought, well, I walked over into the men's section once I came out, and I was allowed to cut my hair because I wasn't allowed to cut my hair unless I was going to be a boy. That's kind of, the fundamentalist way of thinking. Everything fit off the rack easier in the men's section than it did the women's section, just because of my build. And I thought, well, then it's meant to be.
That seems like more of a people pleasing idea than to please yourself, or any type of dysphoria or any type of gender euphoria. This fits better. I'm going to wear this. My mom would accept me this way, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to let you finish that thought, though. So,
and even now, having conversations with my mom, because she knows I'm questioning things, she goes, I said, well, which one would you have been more accepting of, me being in a straight relationship now versus me, still presenting as a woman, like, not transitioning and being a lesbian? And she goes, I'm not sure I could have accepted that.
Wow.
So,
I really am just fascinated by how many detrans people, and again, I know you're not taking that label necessarily, um,
okay, if Casey's not taking the label of detransitioning, then what is even the point of this whole thing?
have that they are, it's almost this internalized homophobia of like, I don't want to be gay, let me be straight. And it sounds, maybe if you're not in it, a little hard to understand, but like, it seems to be with everyone at this point that I've spoken to. Every single one has had some sort of self-hatred. Hatred's a strong word, but some sort of discomfort with the fact that they are perceived as gay, and this is their way to enter the straight world. And I get it as someone who has transitioned, and I never fit in the gay world, but I also never had like a hatred for being perceived as a gay male. I was just like,
If you take a look at the statistics that we showed earlier, that is one portion of them, as well as the traumas that have come along in people's lives. But I just don't like the fact that she's sitting here and saying, this is something that's prominent that I've interviewed people with. How many people have you interviewed? Right? There seems to be common themes, but there are a lot of common themes.
a gay male. I was just like, it is what it is. But then moving to the straight world, it was definitely, a huge change. And you can attest to that as well. So that's like just fascinating to hear that it really boils down to a homophobia problem in some ways, at least.
yeah. Oh, and also plot twist. And I talked with Buck Angel about this. After a long enough period on testosterone, my sexuality changed. So, I mean, right now at this point, I don't like anybody because I'm on antidepressants, and it completely kills my libido and any desire. But before that, before a med change, I then identified as a gay man. So that completely just, that idea that I had that I was just going to be a straight guy and just live my life was dashed against the rocks.
Yeah, that must have been a punch in the gut, to be honest. Especially with the whole mom situation. Like, would you rather me be a straight man? Plot twist. I like guys.
Wow. So what is the message that you actually want to get out that the trans activists are so desperate for you to not actually get out?
I think that I know that we need to focus on therapy and fixing other problems that kids and teens and young adults are having instead of jumping the gun and saying, well, you're trans, here's your surgery, here's your hormones. Because I was fast tracked.
I do think that therapy is very, very important, especially when you start to come to the realization that you're trans. I think that you should have multiple sessions, talk about everything in your life, every aspect and all that stuff. Absolutely. I think it's very useful. And therapy in general is too, but especially when you're trans.
Like within 6 months of me starting hormones, I had top surgery. It was done. And that was within several months of first contact. I had 2 appointments because the idea was, well, he's going to kill himself if we don't do this, right? For me, I think we need to stop pathologizing the normal teenage experience. And
Yes.
Wait, so why would they say you're going to KYS and then just throw you on hormones? You would have had to say something about that to them. Like, I'm so uncomfortable. If I can't stop being uncomfortable and take hormones, then I'm going to do this. I feel like there's a bit of missing information here. So, also, feeling like you are transgender is not the normal teenage experience. I gotta go to bed, dude. I've been filming this video for like 3 hours. We gotta wrap it up. Come on.
The whole teenage angst thing, because I thought that being trans meant you were uncomfortable with your body and that was a uniquely trans thing. Well, I found out from talking with people that that's not a unique trans thing. Everybody's uncomfortable with their bodies. And, instead of, moving to change ourselves to better fit what society's expectations of us are, I think in some respects, the trans community needs to practice what they preach and talk about self-love and self-acceptance. They say trans bodies are good bodies, trans bodies are valid, but also, well, what if we don't have to change our bodies? What if there's another way? Sorry, I'm trying to think of how to do this.
No, I know what you mean, because
I mean, you can still be transgender and be comfortable with your body. Some people like to have what they have and they're still a man or still a woman. Some trans people get surgeries.
it's almost as if, it's not almost as if, it is as if they have these completely contradictory statements. It's trans bodies are beautiful, trans bodies are valid, you don't need to have surgery to be trans, but also we're going to fast track these kids into having these surgeries. I mean, how old were you when you got your top surgery?
I was 17.
I just don't understand why they're acting like you were handcuffed and you were rolled into a hospital and got surgery. You wanted the surgery. You made the appointment to get the surgery. You see a surgeon, you go in, you have a consultation. We're going to do this, this, and this. Okay. Thank you.
See, to me, this is what I struggle with the most. And I say this to everyone I talk to in this situation. I struggle so much to understand, first of all, why it's bad to talk about this. And second of all, how other people don't see it. I don't understand how people don't understand the negative reality of letting kids consent to these life-changing surgeries. To me, it's like a simple 1-2, like 1 + 1 = 2. And it's just like, it doesn't process to them. And I know the argument is, well, trans people usually or always wish they would have transitioned earlier so they could pass better, which first of all, you can pass transitioning as an adult. It's done all the time. And second of all, why exactly are we prioritizing looks and an aesthetic and features over fertility, over having your body parts intact until you're able to decide for sure if you actually want to alter them? What is happening?
This is so hypocritical because she is saying, well, why are we prioritizing looks and features and all that stuff? But if somebody doesn't want to look like her, they're not actually transgender.
I can understand the perspective that they don't want people to suffer more if they could prevent that suffering. And if we could, from the medical model, if we can look at a certain illness and intervene sooner, then less damage will be done, right? But in reality, we're potentially causing more damage, with puberty blockers. I was fortunate enough to not be on puberty blockers. I'd already been through puberty. But with the testosterone and the top surgery, all right, my breasts are gone, like they're gone. Luckily, that's not a big selling point for me. That's not like a huge problem for me, but I'm not sure I can come off hormones. I'm not sure if I did want to detransition, I could ever have kids. I'm not even sure that my female reproductive system works because it was dysfunctional before hormones and now I've suppressed it for almost 5 years.
I get it. Okay. I understand, right? Some people are going to transition. It's not for them. What about the success stories as well? There are going to be people who detransition, and I just think that that is inevitable. I don't think there is any way that we would be able to stop this. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how great you have for medical professionals. It just does not matter. Some people are going to believe this is what they need to do. This is how they feel, and they're going to do that. And they're going to go through with that, and they truly feel that. And maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, they're like, yikes, that was not the right decision. I'm not really comfortable. And I just feel like there's no way to determine that. It isn't an impossible. I just don't feel, I don't feel like that's possible. What is the resolution? You guys have to wait till you're 30 to transition, okay?
So I can empathize with trying to intervene sooner to reduce psychological stress, but it's coming at the cost of physical harm.
And I just want to say, not necessarily is it physically harming. I wanted to show you guys these statistics. So it says diagnoses of youths with gender dysphoria surge. Take a look at the years. Puberty blockers. U.S. patients ages 6 to 17 with prior gender dysphoria diagnosis initiating puberty blocker treatment. Hormone therapy. U.S. patients ages 6 to 17 with a prior gender dysphoria diagnosis initiating hormone treatment. Top surgeries. U.S. patients ages 13 to 17 undergoing mastectomy with a prior gender dysphoria diagnosis. Here's this so your little eyes can read it, because I don't want to read it.
Right. And that's not a trade-off that, again, you can just consent to make as a kid. You have really famous examples such as Jazz Jennings. Jazz Jennings was portrayed as the poster child for trans kids, right? Famous at a very young age, ended up being, into the process of blockers and hormones and surgery before she was even 18, all of it. And because she was on puberty blockers, she didn't actually develop enough to be able to reuse her, flesh and body parts to make a proper vagina, and had to go through all these revisions. So if the argument is that puberty blockers are suddenly going to make a transition easier, I don't even think Jazz Jennings could vouch for that. Seems to have made her transition a whole lot harder.
Honestly, I really do feel bad for Jazz, and I feel bad for people like Jazz. It's interesting that, she was supposed to be set up as this poster child, but sometimes you can't hide what reality is. And certainly when I was investigating transitioning, and, I did see documentaries about kids that were on puberty blockers and so on, there were no bad cases. It was especially like with trans girls that were on puberty blockers. Oh, they stopped the male puberty. They went through female puberty. They got bottom surgery as soon as they turned 18, and everything was fine. No complications. They just reintegrated into society. It was this rosy thing, but she's had the spotlight on her for so long. And if she's going in and out of surgery again and having issues, I like how you can't spin that.
Right. Bottom surgery is not an easy process for either. Just like a lot of surgeries aren't an easy process. And bottom surgery requires sometimes multiple surgeries. It is not an easy thing to go through. That doesn't make it bad, though. That doesn't mean that it's not for that person. If that's what they want, they're going to do that.
Wow. Where can people follow you?
So right now I'm mainly just on Twitter, at Casey Miller 1225. I also recently started a Substack where I'm just going to be writing about my experiences and hopefully using my valuable college education that I rant about sometimes on Twitter, and kind of just looking at the structure of the trans cult and how we got here.
This is why people are mad at you. You're saying trans cult.
And just kind of comparing some of my experiences and just laying it all out in a longer format. I'm still getting the hang of all of this, so.
Okay. Well, you're doing amazing.
Thank
you're
you.
A rock star.
I don't know how, but I am.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's video, and I'm really happy to make this video because I think that learning about detransitioning is very, very important. It's a very tough subject, but I feel like we shouldn't put fear behind it. We don't have to scare people. We can just educate them instead of telling them and kind of being a dick about it and making them scared of everything. You don't have to do that. Why don't we just educate people and just have a conversation with each other instead of bashing on each other? It's not ideal, but the world isn't perfect, so I can't really tell anybody stop being an asshole. So yeah, that's not gonna work out. I will see all you guys next week with a new video, and thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll see you next week.